being a scientist, leads you to try to always dig deeper, and not accept things as they are. You can use technology to improve and make it more efficient, safer, and so forth. And we built a vertical winery here, and with that in mind, trying to essentially make the wine, move it through the steps of its manufacturing and aging and so forth, and blending by the use of gravity. Technology is very, very embedded in the winemaking process. For example, this thing. The use of gravity in winemaking is essentially to out of the need to not use pumps. Pumps damage the delicate molecular structure of the wine and therefore degrade the taste in the wine.
Radiation changes human beings molecularly as well, right?
Well, ionizing radiation, what it does is it essentially, it has the potential to disrupt, important cellular structures, particularly, nucleic acids, and produce mutations, produce damage to the, chromosomal damage and so forth. So, there is a motivation there to try to replace ionizing radiation with things that are less invasive.
So if it's good enough for grapes, why shouldn't it be good enough for us? Why shouldn't we be looking for solutions that can make things better? Solutions that we know won't change our DNA or ultimately lead to orthopedic injury. Maybe it's too late for me. Maybe what's the radiation exposure to my bone marrow, maybe it's too late. Maybe the orthopedic injury that I've sustained. But what I'd like to think is the new things that we're doing and the awareness that we want to bring to this subject, maybe we can help future generations avoid these consequences. There have been a number of solutions tried over the years. The most primitive solutions is wearing a lead apron, for instance.
If you really think about it, the X-ray lead that we wear is, maybe it might be thinner, it might be more ergonomic, but it's exactly the same thing. Basically, I don't feel any more protected in the cath lab today than I did in 1980.
Lead vests haven't changed much in 100 years. Now, progress has been made on fluoro X-ray machines. They've become more efficient, but remember, our cases have also gotten complicated and much longer.
The main factor is really the machine that you're using. Not all of them are the same. I have done, thousands of these complex procedures. I have monitored my own dose since I started, and I don't know my total dose of radiation. I know that now my radiation is 1/5 of what used to be when I started. And that, to a large extent, is not the result of me getting better, but is the result of the technology getting better.
The whole procedure has gotten infinitely more sophisticated in terms of the pre-procedure planning. A lot of the stuff that we do in the structural arena with use of CT planning allows us to really do phenomenal work, more and more efficient.
Every time a catheter goes into a patient's heart, is basically a chance for a stroke to occur. It requires extra radiation exposure because we put a wire and we have to see the catheter go into the patient's body. And it also requires additional procedure time. So if I can bench this, and I just did that on 2 different patients in less than 2 minutes with a 3D model and this heart, I've just saved at least 10 to 15 minutes of procedure time and a stroke risk in the procedure and made it safer for a patient already. What we actually enabled was technology including 3D printing, advanced 3D and 4D imaging, both pre-procedurally and in the procedure, so that we can actually give our physician implanting teams a roadmap of that patient's specific heart before we ever do the procedure. So we'll start with this patient's heart. This is the left ventricle, left atrium, and the aorta. What we have done here is very segmented. They have some calcium in here. What we want to see is that we can figure out what valve to put in first. So can you go to left blood volume hollow for me and go to the surgeon's view? So our team understands the anatomy like a surgeon would, and we take this 3D print and make it a virtual 3D print. In this virtual 3D print, you can see in red is a calcification. Can you put 29 valve in there for me? and we can actually virtually implant a valve. So we actually were able to increase our actual success rate for these procedures to 98-99%. This was definitely a significant decrease in the amount of radiation both the patient and the team were exposed to during the cases, because we were able to actually plan a patient-specific procedure beforehand.
There are other technologies right now that are available that actually would alleviate the weight, especially the lead weight, off of the physician. The problem with these technologies, I mean, it's a great step forward, but the problem with it, it does not take into account the need of physicians for mobility. So it works in certain situations, like the physician does not need to move. So that's going to sound silly, but like some physicians, you can stay next to the wrist of a patient, or you can stay next to the hip of a patient. But in the type of work that we do with patients with PAD or peripheral arterial disease or critical limb ischemia, the physician sometimes have to move.
So the jacket, this is something that I've designed myself to help actually reduce the weight. All you have to do is lift your shoulders up, bring this in, and just have a little Velcro here. And now look at this. It's completely, it's completely effortless. And now I don't feel anything because the way it's distributed here on my hips. And
you'll be so surprised how many great radiation protection technology available for us. And we have not looked for it because we physicians are almost like a tunnel vision people. We get up in the morning, come in, do really complex surgeries, and don't think about ourselves. But I did the opposite for almost 6 months, where I did research until I found material that is thinner than the current material that we have, lighter, but also when you think of the physics and how you can actually distribute the weight of any lead, especially when you lower the weight of it, you can protect your body with a lot less lead, but also the dynamic of the way you make the lead. You can deflect scattering radiation away from your body. The scattering radiation, when it hits it, it will go away. It would not continue to go toward you.
Moving forward, it's very important that we design environments to work in a radiation environment that take the operator into account. I, like many others, have had the need for spine surgery on several occasions, knee surgery, including neck and cervical spine injuries. It's been a personal goal of mine because I've been involved in room design and environment design for the last 20 years of my career to really optimize that. And we took, in the new Miami Cardiac and Vascular Institute, for instance, we took photographs of probably hundreds of procedures being done to identify when operators were putting themselves in suboptimal positions, and try to take that information and deploy it into room design to optimize line of sight so that doctors don't have to turn their head when they have lead wearing on their shoulders, to reduce the direct effect of lead on the spine, and to optimize the physical working environment for the operators.
We are in the cardiac catheterization laboratory. This is where all the magic occurs. Over the 30 years that I've been doing cath lab procedures, there have been great innovations in medicine. The lead apron is interesting in that 30 years ago, they didn't protect the face. They still don't protect the face and the head. 30 years ago, they didn't protect the arms and the legs. They still don't protect the arms and the legs.
You know, the idea that we wear lead on top of us, you know, and we carry around our own shield basically with your own spine is just, it's almost laughable. You know, I mean, I think that we protect the chest with lead, and it's never really like entered people's minds before that, like, why are you standing here getting your head radiated? And, you know, when you do a typical case, you know, you're going to get a chest x-ray's worth of radiation to your head every case. And, you know, and I think the fact that we have been doing that for years and you know, we have some shielding to block it, but, you know, you put radiation badges up on the collar and that's what you're going to get. You're going to get around, you know, 2 millirem during a case. That's a real case. And that's going to go to your head. And, it's an area that needed to have attention paid into it and technology to advance it. And I think, there's several systems available around the country that are geared towards mitigating the radiation exposure to the room. We have a shielding system here that's really nice. It's a 1-inch thick lead shield that basically sits over the patient and blocks both the radiation from the source as well as most of the scatter radiation. So we actually do not wear lead in our labs, and it's nice with our system because we, everybody staff-wise doesn't have to wear lead either.
The newer technologies are really a barrier protection. So you place this barrier. It's taking off the personal protection and giving you a community protection. So if you think of radiation as basically a source of light, then you want to stay in the shadow of that light. So anything on this side of this barrier is in the shadow of that light. These barrier technologies, this new line of new technology is going to be the way things are. And I think as new people start coming into the labs, they're going to just not even remember the lead apron. In fact, they're going to look back and say, y'all did what?
We're at the very early infancy stages of this. I think that, it's a very big, I'll call it a blue ocean that needs a lot of education out there.
This is a new radiation barrier system that we use. This will fit as a half moon over the patient. Now it's going to block the radiation coming from the image intensifier, from the radiation source. That cuts down on radiation to a dramatic degree. Now think about this. Think about what a monumental movement forward this is. Less radiation exposure to the physicians and nurses, almost no radiation exposure, and taking the lead apron off the physicians and nurses. Now, this has the potential to be game-changing technology. We have done research in our cardiac catheterization laboratory on one such system. And you could do, based on the data we have, you could perform 1,000 procedures a year. Now, that's a lot of procedures. You could perform 1,000 procedures a year and still only be at 2% of the maximum allowable threshold for radiation exposure in a year. Some of these new systems are very slick, and they really do reduce the radiation exposure to zero or near zero.
We are, I do believe, just beginning to see newer technologies that are allowing us to create these barriers, and they all have ways to go to continue to perfect them. We need to make sure that they're able to be set up quickly. I think that the way that they're set up to make sure that there's no gaps in the radiation, I think are important. And I think as time goes on, there's going to be simple ways and designs that make it so that those gaps are automatically covered.
Now you have to remember, this is only protect the people who are sitting on this corner on this side of the patient. If person this side of the patient, they have no protection, they still have to wear a lead.
So the person such as myself or any anesthesiologist administering the anesthesia for the patients during the case will on average be exposed 11-fold more to radiation than the person standing on the patient's right side of the body. So at Henry Ford, we're very unique in that we actually have this setup. We have a rolling shield where I stand at the head of the bed so that from my chest down, I'm protected. This radiation shield is an extra investment that Henry Ford Health put in for our interventional imaging physicians. This actually deflects the radiation scatter that occurs from the physician standing at the side of the bed. So you can see these two shields deflect each other, so there's no radiation coming to me from this standpoint. What we additionally have is that when we're standing ahead of the bed, when these shields are put into place, we have a 7-foot shield that I can additionally stand behind too. So from this aspect, from my perspective, I can put my arm and do my imaging, and only my right hand is going to be exposed when I'm doing any imaging. But my brain, my eyes, my organs are all protected with this comprehensive shielding. And my radiation protection is very, very good. And on top of that, I have a lead cap. I have my radiation protection lead glasses. And then I have my leads I'm not wearing right now that are double leaded. All the cath labs, all of the operating rooms are built for how things were done in the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. The need for building radiation shielding, radiation protection for people standing at the head of the bed is a concept that is still relatively new to vendors. It has not been taken up or broached by vendors because they don't see a potential market value or the unmet need.
When you look at the reality of what we do every day, there's so many different specialties, right? You can't stand in one place and do what you have to do. You have to be 1 minute here, and then suddenly something happens 4 feet away from you. Then you have to run to that place and then do whatever you have to do there. And then maybe you have to go to the side and come back. So you're constantly moving. So there are some things that protect some boxes you put around the patient, but then you don't have access to the patient like you want to.
You know, maybe there's a role for a transition period, whether that's wearing the lead or going to a lighter lead. I can see that. But the ultimate goal is zero radiation.
There's a lot of things that we have to work on. So I think that's something that I think you're going to see a lot of improvement in the next couple of years. As time goes on, once barrier technology is an accepted technology, then I think that will go very fast. But I think until then, we still have to work and plow that ground of acceptance that people are okay walking into a room without their lead apron on. And the only way that you can do that is through data, with showing them that, hey, listen, this is the data, that with the lead apron, you're getting this, and your exposed body parts are getting this. And without the lead apron, with the barrier technology, you're getting something that is that's better. And I think if we move toward that, and then they begin to see more and more people using barrier technology, and the trainees in these big institutions are getting trained with barrier technology, then when they leave and they go into practice, then hopefully they'll insist on that, because that's what they're used to.
It's really an unusual thing to get used to, not wearing lead for the case. You always feel like you forgot your lead midway through the case, but it is pretty nice from a perspective from your back pain and comfort during the case.
The tips, that's the direction. So that will be where the device has stopped, and it's just pointing you in the direction that you're going.
So what about leaving X-ray behind altogether? We have already decreased fluoro X-ray time using other modalities, such as ultrasound as adjunctive imaging. But could another modality actually replace X-ray?
Some of the new imaging modalities, these are important tools. It's early on in their evolution, but this idea of doing fluoroless navigation is certainly here. It needs to be expanded. It needs to make more catheters that are available for this, but the concepts basically have clearly been demonstrated.
This is an example of a catheter and wire that's connected to, that has sensors called the IOPS, intraoperative position system. So basically, without radiation, without fluoroscopy, we can navigate this catheter inside the patient.
I was studying computer graphics at Cornell's program of computer graphics. It was led by a man named Don Greenberg. Well, leadership and excellence and vision seems to run in the blood. Professor Greenberg introduced me to his son, Roy Greenberg. And at the time, Dr. Greenberg was a leader in the space of aortic minimally invasive surgery. Roy was a prolific innovator. I became part of a team of engineers that he'd assembled within Cleveland Clinic. You know, it was always Roy's vision to radically modernize the way that image guidance was done. Roy had developed a rare form of cancer I believe it was appendiceal carcinoma, so cancer of the appendix. Cancer is, there are many causes for it, and it's kind of a random stochastic process by which, cells in the body turn cancerous. So no one can say for sure what caused any instance of cancer, but I do know that Roy spent a lot of time in these fluoroscopy suites, healing his patients, teaching his proteges, and launching new techniques. And that's when we realized that the technology we'd been working on to improve the quality of image guidance, we could also use it to improve radiation safety. So what we did was try to develop a technique to do endovascular navigation using electromagnetic tracking. In a lot of these procedures, there's almost always a high quality scan, like a CAT scan that's done beforehand. You can use that to make a really high quality 3D map to navigate through.
Essentially, we can see wires, we can see catheters inside the patient anatomy without having to step on the radiation pedal. So this, I think, is just the beginning, quite frankly, because with a little more advances, I think better catheters, better wires, we are going to be able to do large parts of this procedure without radiation.
Now there will be a need still for some real-time imaging, but you can do a lot navigating through these maps. Well, unfortunately, Roy's illness came back, and we lost him when he was less than 50 years old.
One of the world's experts in interventional cardiac MRI, particularly in children, was Dr. Kanishka Ratnayaka. And he was really pushing forward the field of interventional cardiac MRI. And he passed away at a very young age of cancer on Christmas Day in 2021. He was a friend of mine, and he was also extremely helpful to me when I was diagnosed with cancer. So I want to now push forward the field of cardiac MRI for our field, for our patients, for the healthcare providers, but also for Kanishka. We now have our first commercially available low field scanner, and this came out in 2020. And this will change the field of ICMR because industry doesn't want to spend money on making the equipment because nobody's using it. But nobody's using it because we don't have the equipment to use. So we feel that low field MR scanning will change the field because we can use conventional equipment because the magnet isn't as strong. It doesn't heat up the equipment as much. We don't get these huge artifacts. And if we can use the equipment that we already have with maybe some minor modifications, then industry is going to be more likely to partner with us.
So this allows us to see all of the soft tissue, the vessels, the heart, whereas when we're using the X-ray, we just sort of see this gray blob in the middle of the chest and we can't actually see where we're going.
We do not know of any significant risks or dangers of using MRI. And I do think that ICMR will come to fruition and will really change the field and hopefully eliminate X-ray from cardiac catheterization.